people, and it's the answer to everything that people need, all their problems, everything. If everybody followed it, this would be a better world. Well, now and there are several religions many religions which say that. There is Judaism, which is predicated on, they say, the Bible. There's Christianity, which is predicated on the Bible. And to a large degree, Islam is predicated on, because they took the Old and New Testament and then put some other material that Prophet Muhammad put in and developed the Quran. Now, each one of these folk are saying, and you have in the Christian religion alone some 580 some different denominations, most of which say that theirs is the unadulterated truth, the only truth, and that the only way you can know God is to know them, and all have the interpretations of what is written in this book. So today it is not my objective to attack anybody's religious belief, and I'm not even approaching it from the point of religion. We're looking at this now as scientists, as from a historical point of view, from the aspect of historical reality. That is what we're dealing with when we're talking about amazing black facts of the Bible today. Now, there are several things here that I want to go. One of the reasons why I raised that is when we were doing one of these classes, a sister said to me, and I thought it was a very good question. She said, "What's the big deal about the Bible?" I thought that was a very good question, because the way it's been projected to us is that's the only possible way that you can get any spiritual knowledge, any knowledge about God. Until some people think it's the only book worth reading. You don't need to read anything else. I remember I was doing a radio interview in Durham, North Carolina, and a sister called up and said, a good elder, and I appreciate it. I understood where she was coming from. She said, "Look, y'all need to get rid of all that history and all that African stuff and just deal with the Bible. And when you deal with that, just deal with the New Testament." I said, "Now, my sister, what kind of work do you do?" She was a registered nurse. I said, "Now, when you went to study to be a registered nurse, did you have to read any other book other than the Bible to learn how to do that?" She said, "Yes." I said, "What did you have to read?" "Well, I had to read text on nursing. I had to learn the language and the nomenclature of this and the different medicines to dispense and how to give the needles and everything." I said, "Did you learn that from the Bible?" When a man comes to fix your television in your house, does he go to the Bible to get instruction to fix that TV? Where does he go to get instruction? So obviously you need to read something else besides the Bible just to make a living. Just the basic things of making a living. To fix your faucet, you need some knowledge that is not found in the Bible. Because if everything you need to know was found in the Bible, then you'd be able to fix everything, you'd be able to do everything you need to do. So that's not a sound argument. Also, we have to come to understand that the Bible is just one of, and we'll be studying that as we go on in this session, is just one of the many books that people consider to be sacred. Therefore, no one has the right to say to another people who has set aside a body of literature and said it was sacred that it is not, because it's not their literature. We don't have that's sheer arrogance. All right, I want you to understand that there are more ways of coming to an understanding of spiritual principles than the Bible itself. I have to establish that at the risk of Christians and other folk wanting to attack me on that. We're going to seek to, let's say, imagine we're in a court of law here. As we seek to cover 42 at least of the 60 documents, let me make sure everybody has a copy here of the documents. You pass that back to them, please. Everybody has a copy. And, oh, you have a copy? Very good. As we seek to cover at least 42 of those 60, these are some of the things we want to make clear. This is the case I'm trying to present. We will attempt to prove and answer the question, who wrote the Bible, first of all? Who wrote it? Some people believe it came down from God out of heaven, and that therefore it is infallible. Everything it is absolutely correct, and you cannot find any wrong in it, and there's no mistakes. It came from God. Other people will tell you, no, it was written by a man. Who did write it? What is the Bible, first of all? That doesn't seem to be very clear to people. Where was it originally written? Some folks seem to think it was written in Hollywood, but it's not. when was it originally written? Some folks seem to think it was done just the other day or every Sunday in the pulpit. What, according to historical documentation, or according to historical documentation, it is absolutely impossible that the white man created the Bible. Now that I'm sure we will prove beyond a doubt. But if I don't prove it, you don't have to agree with me. Why the Caucasian version of the Bible is so different from the original version of the Bible? There's a reason for that. And we've already discussed that the Bible is an ancient African history book. It is the history of a particular nation of people who were black people. The Israelites were black people originally before they were taken into captivity and mixed up like so many of us are mixed up. They were originally a jet black people who had come from the continent of Africa and settled in Palestine. We will be tracing that historically and documenting it. And then we will discuss the Bible as a textbook for understanding our history. And you see, for many of us, we would never have heard about Egypt or Ethiopia, proper names being Kemet and Cush. We'd never know anything about it if it hadn't been for what? The Bible. That was the first introduction that we had to it. Motion pictures that you saw Carlton Heston and everybody in opened the door to it. So therefore, the book can be, because there are some folk who go to another extreme. There are some folks that think the Bible is the answer to everything, and that's all you need. And there's other people that go to another extreme that say, well, we don't need it at all. Let's just throw it in the trash. Now, obviously, that's not the thing to do. Because Nat Turner found a way to use it, Harriet Tubman found a way to use it, and we have Dr. King found a way to use it, Brother Malcolm found a way to use it, Elijah Muhammad. We have found ways of using it, and we should use it because it's originally our book, and you don't take something that somebody has taken from you and messed up and throw it away. If somebody take your house away from you and rearrange it, when you get your house back, if it's a sturdy house, what you going to do? You're going to throw the house away or burn it down, or what are you going to do? You're going to put it back like it should be because it was what? It was yours in the first place. So that's how it is when we're dealing with the Bible. Now, let's go into lesson 1, the African origin of the Bible. And we're going to be taking breaks along the way, and we're going to have time for question and answers. Are you ready? Let me make sure I'm ready. I don't need this microphone, do I? No, okay. I'm sure everyone in here can hear me. The first document, document 1. The question is asked, who wrote the Bible? That's the question we want to deal with, first of all. Okay, let me get one other thing here to make sure I'm completely ready, so once we get started, I don't have to stop. All right. The first document is taken from 100 Amazing Black Facts About the Negro. That was the term used back in the 1920s. Page 9, number 49, by the prolific scholar, historian, and writer, Joel A. Rogers. And this is what the document says. The Bible really originated in ancient where? Egypt. We're going to break it down. We're going to read it first and then we'll break it down. Where the population, according to Herodotus and Aristotle, was. Here, the Jews received almost all of their early culture. Professor Breasted, leading Egyptologist, says the right social and moral development of mankind in the Nile Valley, which is 3,000 years what? Than that of the Hebrews, contributed essentially to the formation of Hebrew literature. Our moral heritage, therefore, derives from a wider human past, enormously older than the Hebrew, and has come to us rather through the Hebrews than from them. Now, those are some key words in there we want to deal with. Some key words we want to deal with. First of all, we're told that where the Bible originated was in Egypt. The proper term for, first of all, I want to find out something for you. Where is Egypt? Okay, you sure about that? You sure it's not in the Middle East or Hollywood or someplace? Asia, in Asia somewhere. No, you can see very clearly, there it is. That's the African continent. It looks like it to me. Of course, you know the proper name for it is Akabu land, the oldest name. The African continent, that's where it is. It's not in the Middle East. Huh? Akabu land. That is the oldest name known so far that we have been able, and we owe that to Dr. Ben, who, by the way, we're dedicating this session to today, and of course to the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, born August the 17th, one of the greatest teachers, one of the greatest leaders and motivators of men the world has ever known. Our Akabu land is the proper name for what is misnomed Africa. Africa is a Latin term that was given by the Romans there, and we use it merely out of convenience on occasion. But Akabu land, land of the blacks, is what it means, is the proper term. Now, therefore, let's deal with the right term for Egypt as well. Dr. Ben tells us, Dr. Ben tells us in, see, I won't be able to read all these to you, but I can tell you where to find them. In Black Man of the Nile and His Family, page 3, Dr. Yusuf Benjo-Channon, and Dr. Williams, page 68 of The Destruction of Black Civilization. They go into detail on this. The proper word for Egypt is Kemet. Kemet. Now, you can spell it several ways. I usually use the short form, Kemet. Dr. Williams goes into detail to show that it comes from Kemi, but we didn't use C's, we used K's. But when the Greeks began to translate our language, they didn't have the K sound, so they had to use what came easy to them, which was the C and the CH. But look at this word Kemet, or Kemi, and what do you see? What do you see? The root for chemistry. Chemistry. Therefore, no black student should ever have a problem with the subject of chemistry. Why not? Because when the very word itself is descriptive of his ancient homeland, the place in his ancient homeland. Chemistry, the land that produced him, the black soil that produced you. The soil that we came from, the soil that nourished us, was called Kemet, from which we get the word chemistry. For the study of chemistry, the study of the soil and things that came from the soil began back perhaps 18,000 years ago in Akabu land, what they call Africa, there in the Nile Valley. Chemistry. Just that one word has a lot of power in it. That one word reveals something to black people about themselves that opens up a whole door to us. That one word, chemistry. So from now on in this class, we will no longer use the term Egypt, which is from the Greek hikupata, H-I-kupa, hikupata, city of Ta. We will never, of the god Ta, which represented uranium back there. All those gods and goddesses of the ancient times were actually scientific symbols. White man didn't know what he was looking at, so they say they worship all these gods and all these. They represented forces of nature. I covered them very carefully in this book, African Genesis. Very carefully, I explain what those gods and goddesses are. That's what they were. It was a complex science, which white folk could not understand when they first encountered it. So all they could do, or all the so-called Egyptologists could do, was say, well, they just got all these gods and goddesses. But even Budge says that they only had one God, one divine creator. And God is not a good term because it is the word, what? Dog spelled backwards. You can see it very carefully. Because one of the first symbols that the European used to represent the force of power of the great deity of the universe on earth was that of a dog. But that's another story. If you want me to deal with that some more, we'll deal with it during question and answer. If you want to do that, just write that down. We'll deal with it. I don't want to get off up into that now and get off the subject. what we usually say is the creator or the divine intelligence. The divine intelligence means that throughout the whole universe, in every leaf on the tree, every blade of grass, every atom, there is intelligence. And that divine intelligence, all collectively, is what is known as and misnomered God. It's not something you can put your hands on or something in one place. You look up here and you look out there. Or the thing I think that is most arrogant is that everybody claims that you can only find this divine intelligence, which keeps the whole planet together, which is in every grain of sand, which is everywhere all over the earth. You can only find it in their church, in their synagogue, in their temple. Now that's the arrogance. But even worse, they have taken it and put it between the pages of a book, between the covers of a book, and you can only find it in there. All this power, the power which cannot be understood. For 1,000 lifetimes, people have it now crushed in between the covers of a book, and you have to come either on Sunday morning or Saturday or Friday or whatever their day of worship, and that's where you have to meet that power, because that's the only place you can meet it. It's everywhere in the universe, but the only place you can meet it is in their place. That shows you how ridiculous it is for black people to ever allow themselves to be pitted against one another on the basis of their what? Their religious difference. We therefore should by sheer intelligence be what? Tolerant of one another's religious expression. Other than that, you're not spiritual, you're religious. What's the difference between spiritual and religious? Spiritual means that you are aware and of your connection with the total cosmic scheme. What does that mean? The whole universe around you, and with all life forms in the universe. You are aware that there's a divine intelligence which governs that, and you seek to come more into understanding and in oneness with that intelligence. Right? That was the object, as Dr. George G.M. James tells us, of all learning, was to bring us in harmony with the one, for whom there was no house built. You can't build a house to contain the one. Right? Now, that's spirituality. Religion is the path that you choose to set you in a disciplinary road to be in harmony with that one. Just like when you come into New York, you can either come across the George Washington Bridge, you can either come through, you got 2-3 tunnels to come in through here, you got several roads to come in here. You'd be a fool to stand there at the Lincoln Tunnel and say, anybody not coming in through the Lincoln Tunnel is not into the truth. They will not make it to New York. You'd be a fool. And whenever we do that with our religious ideologies, with our religious institutions, we are not worshiping the Creator. We are getting off on our egos. We are intellectually masturbating is what we're doing. We're getting our egos off because we got a carte blanche on God. We got a hold on God, and nobody else got this hold but me and the church I go to, or the sect of Islam I'm into. Now, there's some folk will get angry with me about that. However, in order for us to be liberated and get on the high level, and we can whip this white man. We can whip it. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Not him holding us up in that regard. I mean, he's doing everything he can, but even with all he does, he couldn't do it. He couldn't hold us up if it wasn't for one thing. One of the things, because there are many complex things there, and that is us constantly struggling with each other over these little petty differences. And in our high culture civilizations, the Moors went into Spain and conquered it. Even though they were Muslims, they were tolerant of Christians, Jews, and everybody else, because they knew all of these were just various expressions of God. Now, in Mecca, where they didn't know nothing in the first place, and they finally got them a religion that they could hold on to, their thing was, accept Islam or die. There's only one way. There's only one God, Allah, and if you don't accept that, there ain't nothing. But the African, once he got hold of Islam, he did what he does with every other religion. What's that? You see how I can apply it to the situation. That's it. Okay, I didn't mean to get all off up into that. Let me come back now. Hikupata, house of the god Ptah, and that's a Greek term. That's what the Greeks called it. Actually, it's Kemetan language, but the Greeks called it that, and they couldn't say Hikupata, so they said Egypt. So they were very tongue-tied. They couldn't speak well. When they supposed to call Ethiopia Kush, they couldn't say Kush, so they said Ethiopia. That's it. They did the best they could. The Greeks will tell you that themselves. They didn't even know how to speak before they met the African. But I'm running ahead of myself. Y'all all right? You with me? Okay. Let me get back to. Let me get back. We're still on that first document, aren't we? We have established where he says where the Bible originated in ancient Kemet. On the continent of Akebuland, the land of the blacks, is where it began. And that he goes on to say another thing in there, that it's 3,000 years older. 3,000 years older than the Hebrews. We will be discussing the Hebrews as we go on further, because the father of the Hebrews doesn't come on the scene until 1675 before the Common Era. And we don't say before Christ, because when you say before Christ, you're assuming that everybody in the world has accepted Christ as, or Jesus as they call him, as the pivotal point of history. And other people do not reckon time that way. Many other people, Buddhists do not, Muslims do not, Hebrews do not. A lot of people don't do that, so you cannot arrogantly assume that everybody does that. So what Dr. Ben did, and we owe him so much, what he did was say before the Common Era, because so many people do use that as a dating factor, simply because what? Europeans went around the world, what? Colonizing other people, and brought their corrupt brand of Christianity with them as they went, because Christianity wasn't originally a European religion, but that's another topic. And BCE, before the Common Era, and instead of AD, which they say in the Christian world, Anno Domino, in the year of our Lord, it's CE of the Common Era. So that's the reference we'll be making here. That also clears up a lot of stuff for us as well, because the way you reckon time also impacts upon you that which is important to you. We reckon time by those events that what? Mean something to us, that we hold of great value. If you keep calling it before Christ or Anno Domino, then you're saying that you hold of greatest value of all things that you know, the European concept of Jesus, and that everyone else must as well. So that's why that was one of the liberating factors there of changing our reference to time. Dr. Williams tells us also the most important is language and names, because one of the ways that they take you away from yourself is to change your name and the names about everything else that is familiar and important to you, and put their names and what is important and familiar to them. Therefore, you have the image of white supremacy implanted on everything, and we therefore duplicate that image, which is self-destructive to us mentally and spiritually, and retards our growth as a people. That's why I take the time to get into the language. Linguistics is a very important study, and to date references and things like that nature. So in 1675, before the Common Era, we have a cat named Abraham we'll be talking about a little later, who comes on the scene. This is the first Hebrew, the first one to cross the water. Now, what was going on in the world before that? What were people doing before that? What did people have as a moral standard before that? What did they have as a holy text before that? They had among the many, because they had them in India, they had them over here in what they call Middle America, which wasn't called America then, over here in the Western Hemisphere. They had them in the islands of the sea. They had them everywhere you could go. You found different texts. And one of the major texts that most all of them had come from, because these people had traveled around the world, was the text developed by the ancient Cushites, who we'll be dealing with a little more as we go on, called the Book of the Coming Forth by Day and by Night. Misnomered by the European again because of his tunnel vision. He's the original Cyclops. He has one eye when he looks at things. He cannot see things clearly in a balanced fashion. He called it the Egyptian Book of the Dead because he thought it was about death. not understanding it was about life continued on, that we didn't have any concept of any death in Africa. There's no concept of death with the original African. No such thing exists. You just go through cycles of constant development in life. So that book was served as the basis for all of the others, and we'll be coming back to that in a minute. So that book has been around Rogers is saying at least 3,000. It says 3,000 or more years. Yes, we know this, that the Kemetan, the beginnings of the Kemetan Empire and the Kemetan nation can be traced back somewhere between 18,000. Listen to this, brothers and sisters. 18,000 to 17,500 years BCE. That's almost 20,000 years ago. Now, the reason why I'm putting emphasis on that, I hope y'all don't mind my going into so much detail here. I don't know how many documents we get through, but we will get a lot of information. The reason why I'm going into that is because, first of all, we tend to think of African history, black people's history, as going only as far back as what? 1619, when they brought 20 of us over here, 21 of us over here on a slave ship. Here, but we know our history goes beyond that. We say, okay, maybe in West Africa you can go back 500, 600, 700 years ago or something like that. We had empires. But to think in terms of 18,000 years? And this was just one nation coming out of an older nation that had been around we don't know how long. But let's just focus on this. Why do I put it at 18,000 years when most historians and Egyptologists, with the exception of a few of us, and those are usually African-centered ones, put it at around 3,500 BCE or 3,100. Now, 3,100 BCE is a favorite with Europeans because they do not like to think of any nation being so far antecedent to Greece. And how far, even when you put it at 3,100, how far in advance of ancient Greece is that, which is the foundation of Western society? And they say the foundation of all learning and science, which we'll deal with in a minute. How far ahead is that? The Greeks didn't even come on the scene with any degree of as a nation until 331. 331 BCE. Look at the difference between 3,100 and 331. This is a black nation in the Nile Valley, which we're going to deal with that a little more in a minute, that precedes the first white man. Dr. John G. Jackson tells us these were the first civilized white folk on earth, the Greeks. The first. 331. Now look at the space of time. Some of them, like Breasted and others, will say 3,500, but they won't go that far. Why do I say 18,000? Look at the difference in time between 3,500 and 18,000. Because the founding of ancient Kemet, through which, where the Bible, what? Originated. Yeah, y'all got to stay with me now, because I'm not going to do all the talk. We together. Where it originated in ancient Kemet, Misnam, Egypt, is where it originated, right? We're now talking about how old is this place where it originated. And Rogers has said it existed at least 3,000 years before there was any Hebrew. So the Hebrews couldn't have written it because it was around before they got here, before there was any. But he said 3,000 years. I'm taking it back some now. We said that the first Hebrew was in 1675. So it's 3,000 years before that would bring us to what? 4675. Right? 4675. They were revising the calendar then, according to Doc Ben, on page 3 in the chronology of the Bible. Revising it, not starting it. Not creating it, revising it. They were also doing, let me read that to you. They were also on page 3 of the chronology. They were not only doing that, they were also doing another translation of the book of the coming forth by day and by night. Another translation, which has come to be known as the Book of the Dead today. So this is how long you Africans are writing, developing a moral code, developing a moral system, developing what came to be known as a Bible. And we'll deal with that word Bible later. But then let me get back to this 18,000. I want you to focus on this 18,000. Because I want you to start getting some idea of how long we have been in the process of doing this. This white man can only look at a civilization that goes back to 331 when he begins to be civilized. Begins the process of civilization, and we're talking about 18,000 years. He admits 3,100 or 3,500, so he admits we have preceded him by 3,000 years. Breasted, a white Egyptologist said, admits that we were civilized, had a moral code, had a Bible, had a system of beliefs 3,000 years before him. He has to admit that because it's inevitable. You cannot get around that. That's what the historical documents say. It's written in stone. You can't get around that. However, I'm at 18,000. Shaka, why are you there? Because according to the tradition, and I'm hooking up tradition, that's mythology, with history. Because mythology, as Rogers tells us, is a kind of shadowy history. Mythology is a way of telling history. But like they didn't have televisions and movies and things back then, so they used mythology to spice the story up. They used imagery. Because imagery enables people to do what? To do what? To see, to comprehend, and also to what? Understand and to retain. Maintain and remember through imagery is how you do it. White boy use it every day on us. Imagery. Imagery is always important. So it's been using it for years. The story says that Osset, misnomer Isis by the Greeks. Osset, do you have this information up here? Okay, and I can erase the board then and start all over again. And keep that figure 18,000 in mind. Osset, Greeks called Isis. Osar, the Greeks called him what? So, okay, y'all gotta move fast. Osiris, proper name, how you do it, is Osset and Osar. And I put Osset first because she was the one who planted the first seeds in that land. They went in to the Nile Valley from Cush. At that time, Cush was all over the world. We're going to deal with Cush later, so table that when we come back to it. They went in and planted the first seed, started the science of agriculture. He started the science, and Osar started the science of husbandry and of beer making and wine making. And that's what the tradition says. That's what the history of ancient Kemet says. That's what most scholars are agreed upon. That the beginning of ancient Kemet starts with the foundation of the science of agriculture in that land, and also the bringing of the alphabet and reading and writing, which was brought by Osset. Now, I cover that in this book, African Woman, the Original Guardian Angel. I also deal with that, they're coming into the Nile Valley there, and how they became gods and goddesses, and what that really means in terms of scientific symbology in African Genesis. Now, that's all the story says. How do I come up with the date 18,000? In science, Blacks in Science, Ancient and Modern Times, edited by one of my colleagues, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and there's so many wonderful scholarly papers in there. One of the things that is made very clear that the beginning of agriculture, as people had believed some time ago, did not start in the so-called Middle East over here in the land between the two rivers, which was about 7,000 years before the Common Era. But actually it was 10,000 years older that they had domesticated and developed the seed for 7 crops. I believe it was wheat, rice, barley, and about 4 or 5 others. I can't remember all of them. Agriculture is the foundation of any development towards civilization. It takes one from the hunter-gatherer nomadic stage, makes one sedentary so you can sit your behind down and think about something else other than how to feed your stomach. That's what agriculture does. And the black woman created agriculture. The black man created husbandry and other things, but she created the basic thing that made him able to sit down and contemplate something other than chasing food, which was the hunt. Now, we owe that to the black woman. That's the basis for all civilization, among other things. We owe that to her. I document that in this in African Woman. When was that? Between 18,000 and 17,500 BCE. This was the founding of agriculture. And about 3,000 to 5,000 years later was husbandry. That husbandry is the domestication of animals. Now, think of how long that is. Well, these are sold, but we can deal with that on the break. All right. I'd love to give them away, but they won't let me. Okay. Now, we're talking about, I'm going to have a chance for question and answer here in a minute, because we try to wrap up each section and move to the next. But 18,000 years ago, the black woman came up with a much more efficient way to feed the human race, which minimized the danger for survival, because the hunt was a chancy thing. You might get your groceries or you might become groceries. I mean, that was always the case there. Those options existed there. So she came up with a way for more efficient food production between 18,000 and 17,500 years ago. That was the beginning of the Kemetan, what was to become the Kemetan World Empire, when Osar and Osset left from Kush and went there into the Nile Valley in what was Lower Egypt. Now, the way this map is incorrect, and I meant to hang the other one up here correctly. This map is upside down. Because the first maps, am I confusing y'all? If I do, let me know. The first maps, we're still dealing with where the Bible originated. We haven't even gotten out of that yet. Y'all with me while I'm going into all this? The first maps were developed and created by the first people to create and develop books and a alphabet and writing, pictographic writing, what they call the hieroglyphics, which means holy writing, is what it means. Hero means holy, Greek for holy. The holy writings, and then other types of writings. The first people to do this, there were no Europeans on earth doing this at all. And when they went in the Nile Valley to develop agriculture there, coming from Kush now, obviously already having this knowledge, when they went there to develop it, they took with them the alphabet and writing, because, as Drusilla Houston and others tells us, and in her book, The Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire, that it was the Kushites who first knew how to write and passed that on to the Kemetans. They first knew that. So the knowledge existed prior to the time they went in the Nile Valley. Am I right in making that deduction? And they went into the Nile Valley about between 18,000 and 17,500. How long did the knowledge exist before that? Perhaps we'll get to answer that question as we go on. If I don't, bring it up in the question and answer session. Therefore, they took this knowledge with them already when they founded agriculture there in the Nile Valley. They didn't stop in the Nile Valley. They traveled on over. I better use this larger map. It was just a hop, skip, and a jump to Palestine, there through Arabia, on up into Persia, and all over into India. And that's why all of those civilizations in their mythology, and I do cover it in African Genesis, in their mythologies of the creation of the world, speak about this black man and woman coming to the land and establishing civilization. Because these same people, whether it was Osset and Osar or their descendants, because I doubt if they lived that long, their descendants, but they were still carrying their name because they were carrying their what? Tradition. And what? And culture. Tradition and culture. They were carrying their Osar, Osset tradition and culture with them wherever they went. So that's in India, anywhere you go in those lands. The Mayas over here also spoke of them, but as I say, I document it carefully. I can't read all those documents today because I'm trying to cover a lot of territory. So not only did the Bible originate in Kemet, which is where? Okay, y'all be with me now. Okay. Not only did it originate there, and not only, as Roger said, it was 3,000 years older than the Hebrews, who didn't come in the land until about what? You're writing it down, 1675 BCE. But it is much older than 3,000 years older, because the foundation of civilization in the Nile Valley, and the word for Nile should be Hapi, that's what they called it, the Happy River. It was a happy river indeed, because it was the provided the bread basket of the world then. The Happy River. It was named after one of their deities, which represented a scientific principle, but that's another story. Now, when they came into the Nile Valley there, 18,000 years ago, the knowledge upon which the Bible was based was already in existence. Already in existence. All right, let's deal with that document some more. You still there? Now, we find that we're still on document 1 now. So the Bible really originated in ancient Egypt, which should be Kemet, or Africa, let's put it that way, where the population, according to Herodotus and Aristotle. Now, for those who may not know, we need to find out who is this person, these persons he's quoting, Herodotus and Aristotle. Herodotus is reputed to have been the father of history, but he was recording history between 484 and 425 BCE. 484 and 425 BCE. And that's a circa date. Circa meaning around about. Now, if he was recording, this is a Greek, if he is recording history there, what about this history that's been going on for at least 18,000 years before he gets on the scene? Or at least 17,000 years before he arrives on the scene? Who was recording history prior to that? So he therefore could not be the what? Father of history. He's the father of what history? European history. For the European, because they trace all of their development back to the Greeks. Everything in their society today is Greek. The fraternities and the sororities are, because that's where they trace it, because the Greeks, according to Dr. John G. Jackson, were the first civilized white folks. Let's make it clear. That first civilization. But you got it, you got part of it right. The first civilized white folks. Right, he compiled what was already in existence. Right, thank you. Because he wasn't creating anything. He went, and he says that in his book, The Histories. He said, the Egyptians told me this, and the Ethiopians told me this, and in India they told me this, and the Chaldeans told me this. That's how he wrote it. So he was taking down other people's stuff and compiling it. That's what he was doing, and editing. So, he got the credit for it, because who was given the credit? If we were passing out the Academy Awards, who would be getting them? You know, what would be the best picture of the year? Daughters of the Dust. I mean, it's unquestionable. There's no question as what the best picture of the year, or any year for a long time, has been Daughters of the Dust. If we were passing out the so he gets the credit, because who's giving the credit? Right now, in this room and in our culture, and as we liberate our minds and selves, we give the credit where credit is due. So history was, of course, was not recorded by him. But I wanted to bring that out because he is used as an authority by not only Rogers, but Dr. Van Serneman, but all of us, all of the African-centered scholars, because he was a first-hand witness. He was there on the scene to see it for himself. And we'll be discussing him some more. Now, who is this Aristotle cat? And it's important that we deal with this Aristotle dude. Who is he?
Intellectual type of person.
A Greek scholar, a Greek intellectual. That's right. And he was on the scene between 384 and 322. 384 and 322. I want you to be taking these notes down. And there's a place back here in the back. There was, I left the space, I hope they did in the repair. Yeah, there's a couple of sheets for the notes and glossary and all that for you to have that information back there. Now, he traveled with Alexander Mesnamed the Great. Yeah, Alexandria is what it should have been called. But anyway, that's another story. And he had, having been given the clue by Herodotus, who visited the land where all the knowledge was, Greek scholars now began to do what? Go to Africa to get their learning. Because that was the only place to get an education, a complete education. And the Greeks didn't have an institution that could give them an education in Greece. Dr. George G.M. James makes that very clear in The Stolen Legacy. They did not have it. It did not exist at that time. It was only after they came in contact with the African. They conquered the African, as Dr. Asa Hilliard III tells us. They eventually conquered the African militarily, but the African in turn conquered them culturally, because they did not have the culture. So their culture came from Africa. So even though they might have conquered the body, they couldn't conquer the soul. We had the soul. They had to get the soul from us. And that's something you must always remember. So when they keep telling our children to be Greek this and the Greek that and the Greeks didn't create any of this knowledge. It came from the African. Okay.
Elvis Presley, the way he is honored now, and he's talking to black folks.
Of course.
White people have the same movement as black people to make supposedly good in so now people hold him as the big God. As the king.
And he was imitating us. And now you got black folks imitating him who was imitating them. that's why it's however, as Brother Malcolm taught us, of all our studies, what? History is best qualified to reward all research. That's why it's important to understand your history there. Now, this Aristotle, the reason why I wanted to focus on him a minute is because when he went into Africa with Alexander now, Misnamet the Great, who defeated, finally, after many years, they defeated the Kemetans, who had become weak in it was about 331, I believe, somewhere in there when they went into Kemet and defeated it. Now, Kemet had existed for 18,000 years prior, or 17,000 some odd years prior to that. No empire lasts forever. All of them come down at some time. But there is no empire on earth that can compare with that. Rome cannot. Rome didn't make it quite 1,000 years. Certainly the Greek states didn't last that long. There is no empire that can compare with the longevity of this African empire. None. And as we talk about later, Kush, which was probably far older than that, we will deal with. Now, when they went in, Alexander was one of those conquerors of the many people who came in and invaded and conquered our land. Alexander was one of those conquerors. We're dealing with document 1 here. Now, one of those conquerors who had received enough enlightenment to appreciate the fact that his people could not grow and become great unless they had the benefit of this knowledge that was already existing on the mother continent of our Kebu land, in Kemet. So what was the first thing they began to do? Raid the library. They set up what was called research centers and began to steal. Raid the libraries under Aristotle. Now, we're talking about Herodotus and Aristotle, who Rogers says and others said that these people in ancient Kemet were black. They saw it. It wasn't something somebody told them. They saw it for themselves. And that these were the people who created and originated the Bible. That's what they said. They were there. They saw it for themselves. This Aristotle goes in and they start to steal. And after they stole all that they could kind of understand and put their names on it and plagiarize it and call it Greek philosophy, which does not exist. It is a non-existent body of knowledge. There is no such thing as Greek philosophy. It is African theology transmogrified and corrupted into Greek philosophy. The Greeks said that themselves, said that the Africans taught them everything they knew. Herodotus, the man we just talked about in history, said all of the gods came from Africa. We got all our knowledge from Africa. That's exactly what they said. They said they got it from Egypt. That was their word, which is Kemet. And as I said, we just looked on the map to find out where Egypt was, to make sure now where it is. Because they keep telling us in all these different places. And I want to make sure where it was. And it's still there on the African continent even today. So that's where they got their knowledge. In Kebu land, which is the proper name for Africa, is where these Greeks got their knowledge. Now, after they got all that they could, they turned around and they burned up a library that possessed some 700,000 books. 700,000. 700,000. Let me put the figure up here. I want you to look at it. 700,000. Folk run around here talking about all you need is the Bible. That's the greatest knowledge. That's the first knowledge. That's the only knowledge. That's God knowledge. There was 700,000 books before the Hebrew Bible was completed. Before the Hebrew Bible was completed, Africans had at least, this is 700,000 they burn up. Now that's not talking about what they took out, what was kept, what was taken off into the desert or other places to keep with them. That's 700,000 volumes. That was only in books. Knowledge. Knowledge that the world is still trying to get back to. And while I'm on that subject, that's not the only time. Every time they hit us, they went for our libraries. Because the one way to cripple a people and keep them from rising again is to hit what? Their source of knowledge, their source of science. And every time they hit us, they would hit them libraries and burn them up. The Romans, another 700,000, and Carthage, which they call Carthage, in the land of Hannibal, another 700,000. Another time, the Persians hit 500,000 and then hauled off about 1 million manuscripts that were scattered all over everywhere, Dr. Williams tells us. When the Semitic Arabs hit the original Cushite Arabs in Arabia, the Cushites who had been there before the Semitics got there, when the jet black, broad-nosed, thick-lipped, kinky-haired, big-butt Cushite Arabians who had been there for thousands of years before the Semitics got there, they burnt up so many books. Drusilla Houston tells us that it took 6 months for the fire to burn out. I know you've heard me say this before, but I'm going to keep saying it because I can't imagine any worse Holocaust than that. It's one thing to kill my body, which is bad, but when you take all of my knowledge, so now you not only killed me, you killed what? All my generations to come. And there's not a one of us in here who wouldn't be willing to give their life for their children, their grandchildren, for future generations. It's just in our nature to do that. When it comes to a decision between your child's life or your grandchildren and your life, it's no question who goes. So when they took that, they took the life of your posterity. So what's a worse Holocaust than that? I can't think of anything. That is the Holocaust. Now they talking about, the Jews talking about patenting the word. If anybody could patent the word, there's only one race on earth that could do it. Could be us. Over close to 200 million lost in the Middle Passage alone. But let me not get on that. And then tore up all my knowledge. At least the Jews knew they were Jews when they got finished with them. They burned a bunch of them up, 5 million of them in the oven. The rest of them knew they were Jews. They killed close to 200 million of us just bringing us over here. And then we confused about who we are. What's a greater Holocaust than that? When you confront, that's a lobotomy. You can perform surgery on somebody like that. So, why I haven't even gotten out of the first document yet, y'all. But this man, Aristotle, this despicable creature, with Alexander, was responsible for the beginning of the destruction of black civilization in terms of the destruction of our literature and science, which was the basis upon which the Bible and all other holy books and all other things is predicated. So, let's go back to the document and get back in focus. Y'all all right? Let me read it again to make sure we got it in focus now. The Bible really originated in Kemet, thank you, which is where? Okay, where the population, according to Herodotus and Aristotle, who we were just discussing, was black. It's no question. Wasn't colored, wasn't Asian, wasn't what?
Big lip.
Big lip, big butt, thick, the broad nose, kinky hair, black. The people who were there and saw it. We're dealing with document one, trying to answer the question, who wrote the Bible? It's taking us this long trying to answer that one question. But that one question, and answering that one question, we get into a whole lot of our own history. There's not a thing you can study on this earth that if you give your time and attention to, it won't take you into great dimensions about our history. There was a white man who wrote that, in Anacalypsis. What was his name? Sir Godfrey Higgins. He said, every time I go to study the origin of anything, I always end up at what? Something black. So you can't study nothing without studying black folks. So we have gotten a lot of information out of this one document. You think are we through with it now? Okay. let me make sure. Yeah, I think I've covered enough with it now. Now, let's move on to the second document. We have to use two documents to answer this question, who wrote the Bible? I'm going to let you answer it for me when we finish these documents, all right? Document 2, we read. It's right there in your source paper. Document 2. The entire Psalms and Hebrew Torah, in parentheses, Christian and Old Testament, are reeked with direct copies of works written, what? Word from the African, in parentheses, Egyptian, Nubian, Cushite, Ethiopia, sayings and teachings. This should not be surprising to anybody, since Moses and most of the earliest Hebrews in Genesis and Exodus were all Africans. They were born in Egypt and Ethiopia. Even the theory of monotheism, the belief of one God above all others, was taught in Egypt before the birth of Moses. Now, Doc Ben just gave us a lot to deal with there, didn't he? Now, you know what we just went through trying to get through Rogers. And Doc Ben is better than Rogers. So you know we're going to have to go through something to get through him now. Black Man on the Nile, page 72 is where that's from. Good old Doc Ben, my main man there. Okay, I'm at document 2, and let's work with it. Now, much of the Old Testament as it appears in today's Bible, the very Bible that most black people have in their homes, was copied directly from ancient Cushite and Kemetic scrolls. Because we don't use the word Egypt. I just went over that in the last document. We don't use the word Ethiopia. And we'll discuss that why as we go on. We use the word Cush, is what the people call themselves, and Kemet, which is what the Egyptians call themselves. Says it was copied directly. That's what Ben said. Ben don't pull no punches. He says copied directly. Directly means what?
Word for word.
Straight from what they say, the horse's mouth. Word for word from ancient Cushite scrolls, which is ancient African scrolls. From the artwork and inscriptions of ancient Kemetic temples, every story that you find in the book of Genesis, whether it is Adam and Eve's story, and I go into that in detail in this book, African Genesis, and where it came from, whether it's the story of Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, all of them are painted on the ancient temples in Africa and were there long before there was a Hebrew. Those stories existed with different names of different people, the same story. So Doc Ben says they were copied word for word. They just changed the name to fit the particular cultural and historical experience of the people who were doing the copying. The Hebrews were just another branch of Africans that had their own particular, just like you can go on the continent now and find over 2,000 different languages and traditions of how the world began and how creation came about. The Hebrews were just one of those traditions. The reason why they seem to be so important to us is because of all of our great literature. It was one of the few things that survived that we can now reclaim as our own, that the white man called his own for so many years. And one of the few of our historical documents that he let us have any access to, because he thought he had done such a thorough job of putting the image of white supremacy there and whitewashing it, that we could in no way possibly be able to go into this book he had rearranged now and find our history. Yet Nat Turner, an unlettered slave on a plantation, when they would taught him to do some reading out of this book, he went in there and found his history. And then as we began to grow, we went in there and found out, because our early scholars here, Rogers and many of the others, began to go to the Bible first. Ethiopia shall stretch forth a hand to, about Egypt and all those things. And they said, wait a minute, this is about us as a people. So he had no idea that we would now be able to take this book and get back to our history through it. That's why, that's the value that the book has to us. Now, it may have a value to you in terms of religion. That's up to you. I don't argue that. I'm talking about history today. That's the real value. That's why we shouldn't be arguing over different parts of it, because the book is confusing in its present state. There's no way in the world you can make sense out of it in its present state unless you have an understanding of our history and the original languages it was written in. All right? So he said it was copied word for word. They just changed the names and so forth. But the stories and all those things existed before they were written in the Bible. So when you hear them in Sunday school, you're hearing your history again, but you've been made to think, because on the Sunday school cards and all that, they got white people. They're certainly in the movies. They got white people, so you think you're studying white people's history when you're actually studying your own history. You know, isn't that something to do to a people? They're looking at their own history. But no, but here was the thing, though. They will take the pictures and the statues and put them in the museums, as they have them all over the world, and will say, these are Mediterranean Caucasians. And here you will have a man with the nose all the way around here, lips big, blowed up, everything, and say, this is a Mediterranean Caucasian. You're looking in a mirror at a picture of yourself, and they say, but that's not you. That's really me. That's not you. But the worst part about it is we say, oh, okay, that's true. That's the part about it. So when you're looking in the Bible, you're looking at a picture, you've been looking at a picture of yourself all this time. Abraham had to go to Egypt to get permission to settle in Palestine. Ethiopia had to come and save Israel's butt from being whipped by the Assyrians 2 or 3 times. So you're looking at your own history in there. And the children of Ham were the children of Mizraim and Put and Canaan and all that. We'll deal with that as we go on. All of them. Black land, Canaanites, black people, all these black people, as Dr. Justice used to say, to make it plain and simple when we were in the seminary, say all them ites that anytime you read ite in the Bible, they're black folks. All them ites in there is black folks. Plain and simple. Isn't that something? All the time you're looking at your history, but somebody has confused us so much that we think we're looking at somebody else's history. So that's one of the joys of this. You can take this one book that you find in any hotel. That's where I got this one from. Any hotel, and teach your history out of it. Now we got to get these chicken-eating, mealy-mouthed preachers away of that. And they can teach the history right out of here. Right out of here. Pork chop, that's right, pork chop eating preachers. Chicken-eating ones, all right, the pork chop eating. That is something. Now some of them say, but they figure, and they go to the seminary to study 4 years to get the BA. Because see, I went through the process, 2 years to get the master, another 2 years to become a doctor of divinity, DD. Just to learn all that about this one little old book here. One little old book they're supposed to be learning about. Of course, they learn about Shakespeare and some other stuff too, but just all that. And never get to know the book, so never get the history of the book. But there are some ministers that are, though, man. You'll be surprised. A lot of them that are on to that. But let me get back to this now. Let me get back to this document, man. I'm still trying to answer this question, who wrote the Bible? Maybe y'all will be able to tell me when I get finished. Anyway. When we study the historical background of the Bible, its languages and the geography of the lands from which it originated. See, one of the key things here is geography, the study of geography. You got to, because we tend to think that because when we came in contact with this Bible, when they brought us into slavery, when they brought us into captivity, we came in contact with it through the Portuguese, the Spanish, the English, the French, or somebody. So we figure, and all them pictures they had in there, these Dutch people and all that in the Bible, and them family picture Bibles with all these big Dutch people and everything, we figured that must be where it is, up here in Europe somewhere. But the incidents are taking place over here, thousands of miles away there. So when you look at the geography, you automatically see you're dealing with a land. This little strip of land is attached to Africa. You can see very clearly it was attached to Africa. It wasn't until the split, it's still physically attached to it. It just depends upon who's in power, whether the Asian or the African, as to whether they're going to call it an Asian land or an African land. But it was attached to our Gaypoo land and still is. Just like Arabia, you can see where it fit right down there, just right neat before there was a split in the earth. Some 50 million years or so ago. So you can see that. So you're looking at, when you just look at the geography, it starts to get your mind straight. First of all. But then we used to say, well, you know, even them people over there ain't white, but them people over there now are not the original people. Unless you go further south. And any of y'all been on the trip know that the further south you go down the Nile, or up the Nile. That's why I told you this map is turned upside down. Because all maps, and I got off track there, didn't I? All maps were created in ancient Akabu land, and the particular nation of Kemet was the first maps, and they went according to the longest river, the mother of all rivers in the world, and which runs 4,160 some odd miles. The Hapi River, which they call the Nile River. And it runs south-north, not north-south. So therefore they said the gods came from and the founders of their land came from the south. And whenever they needed rejuvenation, and whenever they needed a revolution to take the land back from the Asians that was here in the Delta, because they never did penetrate in ancient times or past that first cataract, they always had to go south to get the armies to come out of there to drive them out and give the land back to the blacks. That's covered in the destruction of black civilization so thoroughly well. I don't think anyone has ever covered it as well as Dr. Williams did in this book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. Now, if that's the case, then the maps were, then what was on top then was that which related to the south, and what was on the bottom was the north. But when white folks got in power and started making the maps, where'd they come from? They came from the where? From the north. So who they gonna put on top? The north. So the map, actually, I got it turned upside down. Right side up is the way it's supposed to be, according to the running of the Nile. Even the map. And it took Van Sertima walked in the, they tell me, that Van Sertima walked in the Kemerton Institute in Chicago, looked at the map the way they have the map right, stood there and looked at it, and he turned to Dr. Jacob Carruthers and Dr. Yusuf Ben Levi, and he said, "What is this?" They say, "It's the proper way the map should be." Van Sertima looked at him and said, "I'm already working on something. I can't deal with this right now." I walked right back out. It was because we saw the thing about it, you know, he came back and dealt with it, but the way he would take you out. Just something as simple as the map of the world. Putting it right. Put your history right. But I have to put it this way because I'm going to have trouble reading it. You're going to have trouble reading it. We have to make sure that our children, actually I had planned to, but I didn't see the space in here because I brought another map so I could put the right map up. Maybe I'll do that during break, put it up the right way. So when you put this map up to teach from so that the children can get familiar, you got to have another one with it up the right way. Y'all all right? Yeah, all right. Okay, that's dealing with just the geography of it now, all right? He says here that and we'll be dealing with that a little later on, that all of the Psalms were written from the sayings, teachings, the Psalms, all of the stuff you find in Genesis and Exodus, all of that. He said it came from Africans, and they were born in Kemet, in Africa. That's where they all came from. Now, he says the Christian Old Testament. We'll deal with the word Torah later on. There's several terminologies. I never like to raise a terminology without dealing with it. And there's several terminologies I want to deal with here. One is the word testament. Now that word testament, as we see it, and we start hearing angels sing, and they be fighting over, they can't even get right. This is supposed to be the unadulterated word of God with no mistakes in it, and the most holiest of all things ever written. And if you follow this, you can answer all your problems, yet they be fighting over which is the best in there, the Old or New Testament. Do they or do they not? Okay. If it is a unified body of belief, why do you have 580-something different Christian denominations alone? Alone. Again, I got to say that. Each one of them saying they got the only truth. So now Africans cannot go that route. I don't care what you believe. I'm not attacking your belief system. Believe what you want to, but you cannot be arrogant in your belief, and you cannot impose your belief on other people. If you have to impose it on somebody else and make them accept it, then it's not what it's made out to be. If it's all that good, what happens? When something good, what? You can't keep people away from it. If it's gold, you can't keep people away from trying to get something. But if you got to force it on them, then you have to rethink it. You have to rethink it. You can't think anything like that. Comes from the Greek word diatheke. Hope you can my writing isn't the best. The Greek word diatheke, testament, is where that word comes from. And what does it mean? It means a covenant, contract, or agreement. The Old Testament was supposed to be the old agreement between God and the chosen people, quote, unquote. And you're arrogant to say that you're one little, I mean, they were so insignificant. This little insignificant nation sitting down in the bottom part of Palestine going to be the chosen of God. But then everybody said that about themselves. But see, we have accepted them selling us that idea. Even when they were Africans, they were arrogant to say that, but then it was common for all people. Anywhere you went in the world, then each nation you went to would have said, God came here first. It was just natural for human beings because it demonstrated their personal what? Relationship with God, or the Creator, that they felt. So that there was no big thing. We're the ones that make it into a very serious thing now. They're the chosen people of God. So now the white ones who have taken power from the black ones, no matter what they do, it's all right. They can kill up a whole bunch of babies, anything there in Palestine, and mistreat the Palestinians, but they're chosen people of God. So they can do everything. They've been persecuted, so they can persecute from now on. See? That's something else. But it means contract or agreement of the Old Testament, and the New Testament is supposed to be a new contract or a new agreement brought in by Jesus, which is another story. Now, these words were first used in connection with what came to be known as the Bible, and we're going to find out what the Bible really is as we go on in these studies. These words were first used not by white folks even, but by black folks were the first to refer to them as the Old and New Testament. The very first people. Who were these black folk? The first one's name was T-E-R-T-U-L-L-I-A-N. We're going to take a break in a little bit. Y'all all right? Yeah. But no, I get to teaching. I'm like the rabbit in the briar patch now. We with you. You know, when you can't hang, let me know. Tertullian, both of Cartatus, which once again, not being able to pronounce our language, they called it Cartatus, the new city, the new founding in northern Al-Qabu land. They called it Carthage, because they couldn't say Cartatus. So you have to realize the Greeks could not speak well. They could not speak. I'm going to quote a white man for you after a while to really validate it. Now, I know y'all don't need that, but some people might need that validation, see, who says they couldn't speak. Cartatus, Tertullian, let me give you the date for him, 155 to 230 of the Common Era, because we don't say AD, we say Common Era, because not everybody's a Christian, not everybody predicates the date off of the birth of Jesus, which is off by 4 to 10 years anyway, but that's another story. 185 to 254 CE. These were both Common Era. Oh, O-R-I-G-E-N. Okay. Origin. These were both bishops in the church, the first church, ecclesia, place of meeting. The first church was a African church. Wasn't the Roman, wasn't Greek, or the Church of England, or anything. It was African. Christianity was spread in Africa first. It was only natural. It was the place in Jerusalem where the followers of Jesus started. Was there in Africa. So it went to Africa. When they were persecuted, they went into Africa. They couldn't get to nowhere else. They couldn't get to Rome anywhere. They went into Africa. That was the first Christian church. And it was a different type of Christianity than we know about today, but then that's another subject. It was these men, it was Tertullian and Origen, who first began to use the word testament, diatheke, from the Greek. And they used the Latin term because they were the ones who made Latin the language of the early Christian church. When the Europeans took it over and became the Roman church, when the Romans took it by force of arms, how did I say? By force of arms, by force of military power. When they took it by force of military power, the Latin language had been established as the language of the church at that time, and therefore in Europe, which had no scholarship prior to that, it became the language of scholars. Latin. What was the Latin language? The Latin language was a derivative from the Punic language. What was the Punic language? The Punic language was the language of Cartatus. It was the language used by Hannibal. and the Africans from Carthatus. It was therefore an African language. So Latin came out of an African language, the Punic language. And I talk about that in my book, Holidays, African People in European Holidays, Genocide, book 2. So even the language that Christianity and the first Bibles were translated in other than Greek. Greek was first and then they went to Latin. The language was developed by Africans and instituted by an African bishop, Tertullian. And the idea of it being broken down into an Old and New Testament was developed by 2 African bishops. You can't get around it. No matter where you go, you're going to run into the African. African was in everything, everywhere. We didn't need anybody to come teach us about God. We didn't need anybody to come teach us about Jesus. We didn't need anybody to come teach us about anything. We already knew everything. Now, I know that sounds arrogant, but I have to say it that way because the rest of the world said they had to come teach us unlettered, unlearned savages. And that in order, and to pay for this education, we had to serve them. Slavery. But even though you went through all that slavery, look all you learned, look all we taught you. You ain't teach me nothing. I already knew it. I knew every religion in the world. That's why yours didn't faze me. They'd seen Christianity before. There was no big thing with them. We convert them to Christianity, which means we therefore have civilized them. They knew these principles before you called them that. They just saw it. You would call them by another name. Okay, if that's what it takes to get along with you white folks and to trade with you, we'll call them that name then. Islam came in. Those cats in the Sudan and those great empires and golden empire, we were the richest black folk in the world. Richest black. Wasn't no more gold nowhere in the world than in Africa. Everything you needed to make you rich was in Africa, in our cable land, in Western, where we came from. Say, in order to do trade with them, because they got the trade routes tied up here in the north and other places, if Islam say I accept there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, Rasulullah, Muhammad is fine. If that's what it takes to do business. But I still believe in the ancient traditions. It's just another way of calling it something. And here they came, it was a big deal. We've Islamized all of Africa. They did not. Because the African had a different concept of Islam than the Eurasians and so-called Semitics that brought it in. Okay, so nobody taught us nothing. Nobody taught us nothing about God, and I've got to emphasize that. I know I don't have to emphasize it to you because most of y'all seem to be learned in these things, but we have to re-emphasize that to other black folks and to our children especially. Because see, that black folks argue you down about this Bible thing. And I mean, they get caught in that one dimension and you can't get their mind to expand beyond it. Because that's all they know. If they come through it as a Jehovah's Witness, that's the truth. There ain't no other truth. Ain't nothing else, can't be nothing. Because that's all they know. If they're Seventh-day Adventists, which I want, this is the truth, the last truth that is ever going to be taught. That's it. You got to get the whole world to accept this, then Jesus will come. Only. Islam, same thing. If you don't accept this, this is the only truth. That's one-dimensional. One-dimensional. There ain't no only truth. If there was one only truth, there would only be one kind of tree, one kind of food, one kind of river, one kind of thinking. If there's an only truth, everything in nature is an expression and a revelation of what? Truth. What is the word truth? From the Greek, aletheia, as we use in today's language, according to the facts. That's what the truth is. And the facts are what? Relative to a given time and situation. If there was only one set of facts, you wouldn't need a court of law. In the court of law, they claim, well, in our courts of law, the object was to get at the truth. That which according to the truth. If there was only one truth, you wouldn't need the darn court of law. It would just be obvious. So there must be many truths when you got to go in court and argue the situation back and forth like that and work it out till you get to that particular truth. Now, if I don't clear up anything else or help to clear up anything, because Dr. Ben and I have been trailblazing this for so long enough, if I don't help to clear up anything else in my lifetime, this one thing I want to clear up with black folk about this whole thing of the truth, and this whole thing of only one way to God, and this whole thing you either got to be Christian, this type of Christian, or this type of Muslim, or this type of Hebrew, or this type of this, or this type of that. You can be all of it. Because with the African, it's not either or. Why not all? It's a part of a total whole. The one. When you hear about the goddess this and the god that and all that, they were manifestations of the one. There was only one God to the African. You've got to understand that. Is that clear? I couldn't overemphasize that enough, because that keeps so much destruction going on among us. So much. And we be putting energies into stuff that we don't need to be putting energies into. Okay, I'm trying to just teach, but you know I'm a preacher and I get caught into that too. Now, let me get, where's that document now? Let me get to finish with the teaching here. The other word I want to deal with here was monotheism in this document. Let's read the document again to put us back on track. Y'all help me with it. Somebody read it for me, please. Document 2. So we forgot where we were, huh? Okay, my sister, please.
The entire Quran and the Hebrew Torah, Christian Old Testament, are read with direct copies of works written word for word from the African, Egyptian, Nubian, Cushite, Ethiopian, Saint, this should not be surprising to anyone, since Moses and most of the early Hebrews in Genesis and Exodus were all Africans. They were born in Egypt and Ethiopia. Even the theory of monotheism, the belief of one God above all others, was taught in Egypt before the birth of Moses. Black men are denominated 72,
Okay. Thank you very much. Since we're going to deal with those Hebrews being out of Egypt and Ethiopia as we go on. And we are going to take a break after this one, okay? Let me read from Dr. Williams on this thing about one God. Well, I got to take time on this because we have been taught that we were running around bowing down, worshiping any and everything, and it wasn't until a white man came with his elevated concept of the one God that Moses taught the world, that he came and gave this idea of the one God that we were now brought out of our abject heathenism and cannibalism to now be upright worshipers of the one true God, which everybody says they know better than the other. All right? Monotheism, the idea of one, from the Greek theist, theos, meaning God, theos, meaning God. And I told you I don't use the term God only as convenience because of the word dog spelled backwards. We usually say creator or divine intelligence. Theos, mono, Latin, one. Monotheism, one Godism is what it is. And did nobody had us before the Hebrews. And the Hebrews didn't understand until the white folks came along and taught them. All right, if you let the white man tell the story. And he's been telling the story for too damn long, if you get my drift. Time for us to tell the story. Tell me the story, Dr. Williams. Dr. Chancellor Williams, after 16 years of field studies in Africa, that's why he's blind today, studying with no lights, everything, 16 intensive years. Make sure he got the record right. This is a monumental work. You have to read The Destruction of Black Civilization, not once, every year of your life. If you live from now on, and you live 20 more years, and I hope you get more than that, you should have read the book 20 times. That book has to be read over and over. It is one of the most precious books ever written in the history of literature. And I'm not trying to sell you on no religion, not trying to sell you on no one person. However, I have to recognize the value of something for what it is. Dr. Ben's books are precious and must be read. All of them have to be read, and several times. However, this one has to be read at least once a year. At least once a year. And I'm going to read to him now about this one God concept that Somebody had to come somewhere and teach the African. And because they brought us this great knowledge of the one God, we had to pay them back with pain, suffering, and slavery. We had to pay for this knowledge they brought us that we did not possess. Or did we? Let's read Dr. Williams now, page 94. Read here. Thebes and the role of religion. The proper word for Thebes, the Greeks called the city of Thebes, the stronghold of the blacks down around the first cataract, first water rapids. In ancient Kemet, the proper word is Wose, the orb, because it was an orb which symbolized the sun that had ostrich feathers on it that the great kings carried, and was passed on to that line, and all of the pharaohs who were crowned in Thebes, all of the kings of Egypt or Kemet crowned in Thebes, had to also not only have the crook and the flail, they also had to have the orb with the wings on it. And in the Bible it says so beautifully that the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, not S-O-N, will arise with healing in his wings. And we'll discuss that a little later as we go on. That's about that orb. O-R-B. It symbolized the sun, and that we were the people of the sun. We didn't worship the sun, we reverenced the sun. Naturally you would reverence the sun. First of all, the sun gave you your beautiful color. Secondly, the sun germinated the soil, which brought forth the food. A sunny day sure beats the hell out of a rainy day, and we experienced in the Nile Valley sunshine all the time. So the sun was of great value to us. So we saw the provision of Almighty God, the divine intelligence, providing for us through the what? The sun. So we had great reverence for the sun, because we were people of the sun. Very simple. Very simple. That's what that orb represented. Okay, and with the wings on it, we'll deal with it. That science that we had was so heavy and so complex. You and I could be 2-3 lifetimes, and we would only have just begun to understand it. So just in what we know today, look what it has done for us. We spent a lifetime of the pursuit of knowledge. We passed that torchlight on to our children and their children. Do you think he can go on in power much longer with that? Because just that knowledge alone will eradicate him eventually. Even if you never lifted a finger, and you have to, you got to do something, that knowledge alone would eradicate him from the earth, because he couldn't stand up under. Couldn't stand up under. I mean, not just having it, using it. If you apply that knowledge, he couldn't stand up on it. He wouldn't be able to handle it. Now, the role of religion in ancient Wose, Thebes, he said. Wose was the mother of cities. It's the oldest city that we know of so far in the world. We don't know exactly when it was built. He said it's built so long ago that it's back in the shadowy mist of history. We don't know the date. It is older than Rome. We can date the city of Rome. We can date the city of Athens in Greek. We can date London, certainly. Paris. But we cannot date Wose, the mother of cities. And where was the mother of cities? Huh? Kemet. And where was Kemet? Don't be afraid to speak up. Our cable land, which is misnomered Africa. I just want to make sure where this mother of cities was. And why is it important that we're talking about it now? And it was called, as it was called, was one of the chief centers of religion. Of what? In Africa. And I'm going to deal with that word religion in a minute. I'm going to deal with that as we go on to explain what that word really means. The blacks were a very religious people. This is before any white folk came in. We were already that way. So we didn't need anybody to bring us any knowledge of the Creator. We were already a very religious people. Already. And I can't overemphasize that. Already. Columbus had to come to teach you that, and we had to go to Africa and get you out. We were already that way. We didn't need anything you had to bring us. Absolutely nothing at all. Because many of us have it in our heads. I used to think that way. all right, so we went through slavery and everything, but then I wouldn't have knew about Jesus Christ, our Lord. And I wouldn't have known about these things I know today and have been able to study in college had they not brought me here, you see. Didn't need nothing, absolutely nothing that the white man had to offer. Now some scholars will not agree with me. Van Sermonheim would fall out over that something because he'd be saying, yeah, I say, as Dr. Bernard, they brought nothing. Nothing. We didn't need anything they had to offer. And if they had something we didn't have, if they'd have left us alone, we'd have found it anyway. We found everything else. We didn't need it. And not at them prices. No. Too high a price to pay. Even if I needed it, I ain't needed it at that price. The blacks were very religious people. And quite a number of religious cities, each one under the special patronage of a god or goddess. And as I mentioned, these gods or goddesses were scientific symbols to explain the phenomena of nature. But I can't go into that now. I do cover that in detail in African Genesis there. Or any number of deities. The gods and goddesses of Wose were among the most important because the city was so, what? Important. Because religion to the Africans, dig this, was far more than ritual reflecting beliefs, but a reality. A what? Reflected in the actual way of life. Oh, I got to stop on that one. Oh, that is so beautiful. This man came, this creature came, I'm going to talk about it because I don't stop apologizing. I got to speak out if nobody else speak out. The white man is the worst creature that was ever on earth. His history says that. Now, you may have some who try to do right, and I give them credit for that and all that. However, them some are not going to make up for all the rest, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't care what people say, hatred versus, I'm talking history. I ain't saying nothing about hatred. I'm talking reality. And another thing is I'm exhausted. I'm speaking collectively. We're exhausted. Look at all the energy we need to give each other just to redeem us from what we're into. Now, if you give up all that love, what you going to have left? For somebody else. But I'm certainly not going to give it to him first before I give it to him. I ain't giving up nothing. I gave it. I paid dues I wasn't even supposed to pay. So I'm going to clear that up, all right? I'm getting old now. Like Dr. Ben said, my mouth don't know no Sunday. I'm going to talk the way I see it. Y'all may not come out and hear me no more. I just have to take that chance. But this creature came here with a false sense of Christianity, false sense of religion, in the name of the creator of the universe, destroyed in the most beautiful paradise. It was paradise when he got here. It was literally paradise when he arrived here. He destroyed it. The people then went to our land with its high culture civilization, destroyed that, and captured us and brought us here, all in the name of a religion. And as the scripture says, a religion that professes but denies the power thereof. It was therefore not a true religion. It was certainly not a spiritual religion, because a spiritual religion will not allow you to mistreat another human being. And I'm going to talk about Islam too. Those who profess to be Muslims and could go to Africa and other places and could enslave and sell the bodies of African people or any people, you tell me you got no religion, you have nothing from the Creator. Because the one thing I know, if I don't know nothing else about the Creator, is that all things were created on the planet Earth to be free and to function within the context of their special and unique place on the earth. And that not one thing was to impose upon another. Granted, for the ecological balance, one animal preys upon another animal. But that is done in balance, and that is limited. It is not done in the name that one animal is inferior to another, that I need you to eat so I can continue to live. Now, if he said we came as predators, which they did, the only way that we could survive as a race was to bring you up under us, be honest. Not that I'm going to accept that, but we would at least fight him harder. But it didn't come that way. He said he came in the name of religion, which for us was a what? What did Dr. Clark say? A way of life. It was how you lived, how you treated one another. The oldest statement that we can find written in stone all over the temples of Africa, up and down the Nile, long before there was a Jesus, long before there was a Moses, long before there was any of those people, is the statement emblazoned in stone, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. All over Africa. That is the basis for religion. If you don't practice that, it ain't no religion. I don't care what kind of book you got. I don't care what you got. It means nothing if you do not treat other people the way you would want to be treated. It's as simple as that. When people run up in your face, what you got to have this, the Bible says here in the 2 Timothy, the word says, and you got to, and they get all up in your face with that. Ask them, say, let's close the book a minute. How do you feel about me as your brother or your sister? The Quran says we got to do that, and you get to speaking in the Arabic. I got to speak it in the Arabic because only holy if I speak it the Arabic. Okay, when you start speaking Arabic, close the book. How do you feel about me as a brother and sister? That's the final analysis of what kind of religion you got. That's the determining factor. Nothing else. The rest of it is philosophy. Live it if you want to, if you don't want to. It ain't worth fighting about. It may be what you need to carry you through. Fine, and you do it, and I'll fight for your right to practice the philosophy. But the only thing that I am really ultimately concerned about is how you're going to treat me, how you're going to treat other African people. That's all. It's as simple as that. Other than that, it ain't good religion. It's nothing. It has no power. It has no weight. Okay, y'all, let me get back to the teaching now, all right? Lord, this moving between preaching and teaching is hard. You don't know when one going to come and the other going to leave. Because religion to the African was far more than ritual reflecting belief, but a reality reflected in their actual way of life, religion from the earliest times became the dynamic force, the what? In the development of all the major aspects of black civilization. Why could they build something that nobody else can build today? The Pyramid of Giza, which cannot be duplicated by anybody in the world with all their laser technology. Nobody can duplicate it. You, black man and woman, built something on the Nile that nobody can duplicate. Nowhere in the world. Nowhere. You look at a black child and you tell them, your ancestors built something that can't nobody else build. Because they be talking, the white man is great. The white man got rocket ships. The white man got this. The white man got that. The white man can do anything. The white man got all this. He cannot build a pyramid. He cannot do it. Couldn't do it. The greatest of all the technicians is they could not do it. He cannot do it. Therefore, if your ancestors built something that he cannot build, there is something in you that you can do that he cannot do, which means you can beat him. That's simple. That's plain. That's simple. Yes, my brother.
The ex-mayor of New York City, Mayor Koch, on a couple of occasions, like to say that his ancestors built the pyramid. Could you defend that?
Yes, I will. First of all, the Pyramid of Giza was built at least 2900 BCE. The first Hebrew, and let me write the date up there again, was Abraham, and we'll be discussing that, 1675 BCE. How much time difference is it between 2900 and 1675 BCE? And that wasn't the first pyramid, that was the Pyramid of Giza. The pyramid, the step pyramid of Saqqara built by Imhotep was built about 5,700. Man, not talking about a gleam in the eye. Say, I knew you before you were gleaming in your father's eye. It wasn't even a gleam in the eye. There's no comparison there. No, those Hebrews didn't, but we'll get to that as we go on about this Hebrew slavery thing. But let me finish with this thing. I'm trying to finish this thing on this one, on monotheism, and close out this first question and take a break. Okay, you with me? Whew, all right. There was a dynamic force where it made them build big stuff. These people built, some of those Kemetans were little. The Nubians were big, but the later Kemetans were little. They were always building this big stuff. The Ramesseum, 65 feet tall, granite. I know you've heard me talk about it before, but that's amazing. That's the hardest rock on the earth. They went up in there and chipped that out. They didn't just chip out a crude looking thing. They made all the delicate features and everything. 65 feet high. All over the Nile. Great big statue, all this big stuff. And to be ordered to build big, you have to do what? What made them think big? Dr. Ben said their religion was their dynamic force, their special relationship to the Creator. They had a special connection with, there's nobody built nothing like that. Even with the Empire State Building, everything is one building going up. Nobody has built a 65-foot anything in so-called modern times and made it look that good and chopped out all them little delicate things. And nobody has done that. Because they didn't have the spiritual force, the spiritual dynamic, the sense of the connection with the source of all light and knowledge in the universe, the divine intelligence, to do it. Okay, I'm coming down now. You with me? You all right? Okay, on page 95. Here scholars from foreign lands came to study. What are they talking about here? They're talking about in Kemet. And from here, religious ideas and architectural design spread abroad. They spread from Kemet to other places. They weren't brought to Kemet. They were sent forth from Kemet. They were exported, not imported. The early Greeks and Romans eagerly, they did what? Copied from both, reshaped them, and made them integral parts of quote-unquote original Western culture. During periods of decline or conquest, Europe and Asia seized and transported from Africa as much of the artifacts of its civilizations as they could. Cambyses, for example, that was in Persia, as early as the 6th century BC, hauled away over $1 million of precious historical materials from Wose alone. $1 million was a lot of money. $1 million was like 100 million back in them days, or like 100 million today, worth of materials. This one nation, Persia, when they invaded us, hauled off from one city over $1 million worth of materials, artifacts, knowledge, books from out of Africa. Cambyses was also one of the countless thousands, how many? Who invaded the tomb repositories of black history during each of the many periods of foreign invasion and foreign rule. Page 97, and we'll be finished with this one. Religion was not only, oh, here it is, the ancient religion that gave birth to science and learning, art, engineering, architecture, the resources for a national economy and political control. That same African religion was the mother of history, of writing, of music, the healing art, the song, and the dance. And he goes on to say on page 120, which I will not read now, that every time they would invade Africa and burn up these books and tear up these artifacts and tear up these temples and got all the plunder they could and hauled off with all the plunder and slaves they could, they would go away. They come back 100 years later, they had rebuilt the civilization better than it was when they first got there. This kept reoccurring. They asked themselves the questions, the Asians did. Why and how can they continue to rebuild these great civilizations like this every time they get torn up? And Dr. Williams said they found out what their secret was, their religion. And that's good. I would that our religion made us do that today. And it did. It helped us get through, as off base as we were in some of that, helped us through slavery and a lot of things. It was a religion that inspired Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman and Malcolm and King and others. But just think of that. And so what did they say? Well, the only way now to make sure that they can't build those institutes, build those civilizations up again, and that we can get in and get some power and rule them, is to become what? Priests in their religion. And once we get into their religion, we are legitimized in their culture. Once we're legitimized in their culture, we can take it over. It took them years to do it, but they did it. That's why you go sitting up in some church with some white man preaching to you, and your pastor, and your reverend, and your bishop, and your so forth and so on. That's the same thing they did in Egypt to take control. But then, they don't even have to have, they can have a black pork chop eating preacher standing up there, but they got the image of that white man behind him, which is his backup and his source of power that he keeps pointing to and referring to. The way they took over the civilization and weakened us was to take over the religion. Remember that, brothers and sisters. Let's close this out now. Answering the question, who wrote the Bible? Based on the two documents we have been discussing for this period of time and all of the history we have covered in this period of time, in answering the question, who wrote the Bible, what would be the logical answer?